It was the middle of summer, and I had just moved to a quiet suburban neighborhood outside of Kyoto for a new job. The town was small, peaceful, and bordered by thick forests that stretched for miles. It seemed like the perfect place to settle in and focus on my work, far from the chaos of the city. One night, after a particularly long day at the office, I decided to take a walk. It was already dark, but the streets were well lit, and the air was warm and calm. As I walked, the street lamps flickered occasionally, casting long, eerie shadows across the empty road. I hadn't been out for more than 15 minutes when I noticed something strange. Up ahead, standing still under a flickering streetlight, was a woman. She was wearing a long beige coat, despite the summer heat, and a surgical mask covered the lower half of her face, something that had become common lately. Her dark, glossy hair hung low over her face, obscuring her eyes, and she stood with her back slightly hunched, as if she was waiting for something. I hesitated for a moment, but it wasn't unusual to see people wearing masks. Thinking nothing of it, I continued walking, planning to pass her and head back home. But as I got closer, something about her felt off. Her stillness. Her posture. The way her head slowly tilted toward me as I approached. I walked past her, but I could feel her eyes on me, watching. Suddenly, her voice cut through the quiet night. "Am I beautiful?" I stopped, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. I glanced back at her, confused. She hadn't moved from her spot under the streetlight, her face still partially obscured by the shadows and her mask. "Excuse me?" I asked, unsure if I'd heard her correctly. Her head tilted further, and I could now see her eyes, dark, gleaming, and unblinking. "Am I beautiful?" she repeated, her voice soft but strange, like she was forcing herself to sound pleasant. Unsure of what else to say, I nodded. "Yes, you are." For a moment, there was silence. The woman didn't move. But then, very slowly, she reached up and pulled the mask down from her face. I felt my stomach drop. Her mouth. It was slit from ear to ear, grotesquely wide and stretched into a permanent, unnatural smile. The skin around the cuts was jagged and raw, as if it had never healed properly. She stared at me with those dark, gleaming eyes, waiting for my reaction. "How about now?" she asked, her voice no longer soft, but cold and threatening. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Every instinct told me to run, but my legs refused to move. I had heard the stories before, Kuchisake-Onna, the Slit-Mouthed Woman. A vengeful spirit who asks whether or not you think she's beautiful. And no matter how you answered, you were doomed. My mind raced, trying to remember how the stories ended, how anyone had ever survived an encounter with her. But nothing came to me. All I could do was stand there, terrified, as she took a step closer. My voice trembled as I tried to respond. Yes, you're beautiful." Her twisted smile widened, the dark slits in her face pulling apart further. "Liar." She moved so fast I barely saw it. Her hand reached into her coat and pulled out a pair of long, gleaming scissors. Before I could react, she lunged at me. I stumbled backward, tripping over my own feet and crashing to the ground. The scissors slashed through the air where I had been standing just seconds before. I scrambled to get up, my heart pounding in my chest as I realized she wasn't playing games. She wanted me dead. I ran. The streets were empty, no one around to hear my screams or help me. The only sound was the pounding of my footsteps and the sharp, metallic snip-snip of the scissors chasing me. I glanced back, and there she was, moving impossibly fast, her wide, slit mouth grinning as she closed the distance between us. "Am I beautiful?" she taunted, her voice echoing in my ears. I knew I couldn't outrun her. Desperation clawed at me as I tried to remember the stories, any way to survive. And then, a thought came to me, something I had heard once: if you confuse her, she might leave you alone. I turned sharply into an alley, panting, my lungs burning as I faced her. She stopped at the mouth of the alley, her smile widening. "Am I beautiful?" she asked again, her voice almost gleeful now. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. You're average," I said, hoping to confuse her, praying that the legends were right. She blinked, her smile faltering for the first time. The scissors in her hand trembled slightly. For a moment, I thought it had worked. But then, her smile returned, wider than ever. She took a slow step forward, the scissors glinting in the dim light. "Liar," she whispered, her voice dripping with malice. I backed up, feeling the cold brick wall against my back. There was nowhere left to run. The shadows seemed to stretch, growing darker as she approached. My vision blurred, and I felt dizzy, my head spinning with fear. Just as she raised the scissors again, ready to strike, a strange, loud sound echoed through the street, a car horn, sharp and jarring. The woman froze, her eyes widening as she whipped around, staring into the distance. The sound repeated, louder this time, like something was calling her. Without warning, she let out a horrible, guttural screech, her face contorting with rage. She turned and bolted down the street, disappearing into the shadows as fast as she had appeared. I stood there, gasping for breath, my body trembling. It felt like hours before I could even move. I don't know what scared her off that night, whether it was a passing car or something else, but I wasn't about to stick around and find out. Even now, I still don't walk alone at night. Because no matter where I go, I can't shake the feeling that she's still out there, waiting for me to slip up, to be alone again. And the next time she asks me, I don't think I'll be so lucky.